Good day, everyone, especially to you, Ma'am Farah. This is the Gudug Algin with my partner, Carsa May Rowena. So, for today, we will be discussing to you guys the chapter 24 entitled Post-Edsa to the Present from 1986 to 2010. So, let's proceed to the discussion. The post-Edsa macroeconomic history of the Philippines covers the period from 1986 to the present time takes up from the acclaimed People Power Revolution in the EDSA Revolution of 1986 that brought democracy and development potentials back to the country that was once in the perils of the martial law era. As we all know in the previous chapter, on February 22, 1986, it is the downfall of the Marcos government. So during this day, it marked a significant national event that has been engraved in the hearts and minds of every Filipino. EDSA People Power's revolution happened was a result of the long oppressed freedom and the life-threatening abuses executed by the Marcos government to cite several events like human rights violations since the martial law. When former Senator Benigno Aquino was shot and killed at the airport, Aquino's death remarked the day that Filipinos learned to fight. His grieving wife, Corazon Aquino, showed the Filipinos and the world the strength and courage to claim back the democracy that Ferdinand Marcos arrested for his personal caprice. Ferdinand E. Marcos was the last president under the Third Republic and the only president under the Fourth Republic. The installation of Corazon C. Aquino through People Power as president of the revolutionary government in 1986 was met by a lot of constitutional questions. Like, how did she clarify the basis of her ascendancy to power and stabilize the new government? What were her priorities and program of government? Or how did her successors, President Ramos, President Estrada, and President Arroyo, assume the presidency? What were their respective priorities and development plans for the country as heads of the Fight Republic? So, in this slide, it presents the presidents from post-EDSA to the present. First is Corazon C. Aquino, next is Fidel Ramos, then Joseph Ejercito Estrada, and lastly, Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Each president from Corazon Aquino to the present administration of Gloria Macapagal Arroyo had a specific program of government. So in this chapter, it highlights the governance or priorities in the administration by each president. So the first president that I will be discussing to you guys is President Corazon Aquino. The Aquino Presidency. Since People Power repudiated Marcos' authority to rule Constitution of 1973, the question arose as to which constitution should Mrs. Corazon Aquino govern the Philippines. After taking her oath of office as president in the Club Filipino, San Juan, Metro Manila, her first official act was to appoint Salvador H. Laurel as Vice President, Juan Ponce Enrile as Secretary of National Defense, Fidel V. Ramos as Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Claudio Tejanque and Vicente Abad Santos as Justices to the Supreme Court. On March 25, 1986, President Corazon Aquino proclaimed a freedom constitution. So according on my research, on March 25, 1986, President Corazon Aquino, through Proclamation Number 3, also abolished the 1973 Constitution and put in place a Provisional Freedom Constitution. President Corazon Aquino proclaimed a Freedom Constitution which defined her power, such as the government was installed through a direct exercise of the power of the Filipino people, assisted by units of the new Armed Force of the Philippines. So President Corazon Aquino vested with unlimited powers and had no desire to become a dictator. The provincial constitution contained a Bill of Rights which obliged her to call a constitutional commissions. The Constitution of 1987, ratified in a plebiscite on February 2, 1987. With this its ratification, the Fifth Republic was born. The 1987 Constitution preserved many of the provisions of the 1935 Constitution. So, among its important and new provision includes a single fixed term of 6 years for president, the president's power to appoint cabinet members, ambassadors, and consuls, the armed forces, subject to confirmation by the Commission on Appointments in Congress, and many more. Moreover, the 1987 Constitution provides for people empowerment, the recall of elected officials, the appointment of sectoral representatives from labor, peasants, urban, poor, indigenous, cultural communities, women, youth, the disabled, and the recognition of the 381 rule of people's organization. The declaration of a nuclear-free Philippines would prohibit an acts of the Aquino. President Corazon Aquino decided not to push through with the Bataan nuclear power plant in 1986 due to safety concerns as well as corruption and fraud issues that plagued the project. The first half of the Aquino government was precarious, or which means dangerous. There were several coup attempts by the RAM and high-ranking military officers loyal to President Marcos, but these attempts failed to get popular support. The rest of Cory Aquino's term was focused on turning the economy around and improving the peace and order situation, especially with regard to human rights and freedom of citizenry. So, Corazon Aquino was the first female president who served as the 11th president of the Philippines from 1986 to 1992. She was the most prominent figure of the 1986 People Power Revolution, which ended the two-decade rule of President Ferdinand Marcos and led to the establishment of the current democratic Fifth Philippine Republic. The next president is Fidel V. Ramos. The Ramos presidency. Philippines before was experiencing a lot of blackouts due to the huge demand for electricity of power plants, the abolishment of the Department of Energy and the discontinuation of the Bataan nuclear power plant during the Aquino administration. But in 1993, he put an end to the power crisis that crippled Filipino homes and industries for 2 years. President Ramos sought the cooperation of Congress, the Senate, and the whole bureaucracy for the implementation of his program of government. Among the first acts of President Ramos were the following: the creation of Legislative Executive Development Council or LEDA to facilitate the passage of priority legislations. Next is the negotiations with military rebels, communist rebels, and Muslim secessionists. Third, the creation of the Specialized Zone of Peace and Development in the Southern Philippines or ZOPAD. Fourth, institution of anti-crime bodies to deal with the crime syndicates, private armies, and terrorists. Fifth, enlistment of the support and participation of the AFP in civil works project, building roads, bridges, schoolhouses, and mega dikes. Disaster preparedness including rescue and rehabilitation, environmental protection and conservation, and human resource development. And lastly, the institution of electoral reforms through the COMELEC. So when it comes to economy, President Ramos favored the exercise of free market forces with the least intervention from the government went for a policy of sustainable development. The Ramos government supported and signed a lot of law, and this law were the following: the Republic Act 7432, which grants a special privilege to senior citizens. So it means that senior citizens was given a special treatment, like when your lolo or lola was going out, they ate at restaurant, they have a discount. They have discounts in transportation services and when buying some stuffs. The next act is Republic Act 8353, which reclassified rape from private offense to public offense, such that it was no longer a crime against chastity, but a crime against a person. So this law considers that any person, whether a prostitute person or a non-virgin person or one who has an active sexual life, may be victimized by rape, by declaring this law that rape is a crime against persons, that anyone who has a knowledge of the crime may file a case on the victim's behalf. Third one is the Republic Act 8369, also known as the Family Courts Act of 1997. So it established courts to handle cases of domestic violence and 384 women's desks in the police agencies to attend to women victims of violence. So the last one is the Woman in Nation Buildings Law. So it gives women equal economics opportunities in national development efforts, budgets for gender and development and government agencies, and can credit or lend windows for women at the Land Bank or Development Bank of the Philippines. So under the Ramos presidency, Philippines was a pioneer in the Build, Operate, Transfer or BOT. When we say BOT, it is a form of project delivery method usually for large-scale infrastructure projects. So, private investors are invited to build certain government projects like power plants, railways, telecommunications, banking, and energy resources. So, Fidel V. Ramos is the 12th President of the Philippines from 1992 to 1998. He is remembered for steadfastly promoting the principles of people empowerment and global competitiveness. So, the Estrada administration and Gloria Macapagal Arroyo government will be tackled by my partner, Carsamere Rowena.
The Estrada administration and people power too. The transfer of power from President Ramos to President Joseph Estrada was peaceful and orderly, despite fears of a failure of election. A few months prior to the election, a group of Ramos supporters they started a petition which is called a Chacha movement for change to allow for a second term in honor of President Ramos. Former President Aquino and Cardinal Sin led a delegation. They protest in Luneta to condemn the Chacha move. But Ramos also opposed to this petition. Ramos' opposition to Chacha proved too strong, resulting the president to resign. And also, President Ramos has proven to be a true Democrat constitutionalist. He also stated unequivocally that he had no intention of pursuing a charter change and also running for a second term as a president. While on the other hand, Estrada, despite being accused of being a womanizer, drinker, and gambler, he won nearly 40% of the votes, together with his vice president, which is Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. The quick canvassing and Senate proclamation of Estrada as president-elect and Macapagal Arroyo as his vice president attested to the democratic processes restored by the EDSA People's Movement. Estrada's career has taken him from the one city as a mayor to turned into a politician to senator, vice president, and finally president. The elite saw the administration as a potential disaster. Philippine society's business sectors. However, this is not the case for the poor people who believe that the administration on will be dedicated to their needs welfare. President Estrada's first acts include includes first the suspension of the release of the 37 billion pesos in pork barrel allocations for pet projects of the congressman. Second, the organization of the Presidential Anti-Organized Crime Task Force with General Panfilo Lacson as head. Third, the reduction of debt servicing or payment to IMF, WB. And lastly, redirection of Land Bank and DPB funds to small and medium scale enterprises. Also, President Estrada's first report to the nation laid his priorities, which are first, provision of opportunities for employment and income generation. Second, provision of food, shelter, and basic utilities. Third, improvement of the economy through the acceleration of infrastructure programs and privatization. Fourth, promotion of participatory leadership that is free from graft and corruption and political patronages. Estrada stayed in office for 2 years and 7 months, faced challenges to his authority, scandals involving both, but also especially his. The news was embraced by both personal and official life. Governor Chavit Singon, he exposed President Estrada's ties to duetting. First, what is duetting? So duetting, the Tagalog pronunciation is wetin, is an illegal numbers game played in the Philippines. Its word is a combination of joey means flower and teng means bet in Chinese. This included, among other things, Vice's resignation. So moving forward, President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo also issued a statement by the Philippine Conference of Catholic Bishops or CBCP, condemning President Estrada's involvement in duetting as morally repugnant. The Magkati Business Club owners laments loss of faith in his ability to govern and have called for his resignation. A massive protest ensued and an impeachment complaint was filed. He blamed former President Estrada for all of his problems. He was persecuting him for his Ramos investigations, scandalous and unexplained multi-billion-dollar projects of the administration. So, after that, President Estrada, he was removed from office not long after the impeachment proceedings began. He was accused of being the owner of a signature under a false name and an untrustworthy bank account. Clarissa's testimony was instrumental in making this possible. Also, Ocampo works as a bank executive, as President Estrada's defense attorney. What happened next was the execution of what appeared to be a coordinated campaign to depose President Estrada, who was elected by the street parliament. General Angelo Reyes, Estrada's AFP chief of staff, he has resigned. People's protests at the Edsa shrine were boasted. Throngs of angry people surrounded Malacanang. So to prevent bloodshed, attempted to scale the walls of Malacanang while helicopters hovered overhead at the top of the palace. The Macapagal Arroyo government. So Gloria Macapagal Arroyo took her oath of office on January 20, 2001. She was the 14th president of the Philippines, and she stayed as a president in the Philippines for almost 10 years or a decade.
From 2001 until 2010, she is the longest serving president of the Philippines since Ferdinand Marcos. Before her accession to the presidency, she served as the 10th Vice President of the Philippines from 1998 to 2001, making her the country's first female vice president under President Joseph Estrada, despite having run on an opposing ticket.
Her first State of the Nation address, or also called SONA, was held on July 23, 2001, which are reduce poverty incidence, fifth poverty by creating jobs, not destroying them, address the complaint of the masses about high price and inadequate wages, reduce excessive friction in labor and management relation, working for industrial peace, control the budget deficit by collecting taxes vigorously and spending money prudently, balance the economic plan to nurture the disadvantaged members of society and those left by progress, increase the chances of Filipino children finishing schools, create 1 million new jobs within the year in agriculture and fisheries, strive to achieve self-sufficiency in rice production, produce cheap rice and increase the number of prosperous farmers, annually distribute 20,000 hectares of land for agrarian reform, 100,000 hectares of private land and 100,000 hectares of public land, including 100 ancestral domain titles for indigenous people. Develop information and communication technology to leapfrog the economy into the new millennia. Stop the increase in prices of basic necessities of workers. Monitor
Oil prices.
increase the number of categories of workers who need not pay taxes, reduce corruption in the executive branch, investigate and prosecute corruption in highest places, reduce corruption among elected officials, no one is above the law, and lastly, enhance relations with the United States, whose economic and military power to continue to make it an important factor in the affairs of region and the nation. She sought a second term on the basis of being brought to the presidency by People Power 2. People Power 1 was a much broader anti-government protest movement. The participants' actions are not spontaneous. In case of individuals, according to political analysts, Power 2 was an elitist-dominated plot against our country. President Estrada, whose pro-Masa and low-key approach to his moral lifestyle, disqualified him from remaining president. GMA's administration has not been as peaceful or popular as she would. She would have preferred charges of corruption and extortion were brought against the defendants. Influence peddling is destroying democratic institutions. Comelec, House of Representative, Supreme Court, and others have been filed, but at least three impeachment cases were filed, but none of them were successful. The country awaits the upcoming events with high hopes for a peaceful outcome amid calls for bagong politika during the transition to the next presidency politics that is transformative.
And that ends our report. I hope you've learned something on this chapter 24. Thank you for listening and stay safe, everyone. Bye bye.